What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Burnout Brighter podcast. This is episode 77. My name is Matt, and I'll be your host for this evening's events. As always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Darren.
Hello.
This week, we are super stoked to have a important conversation about representation in gaming and how a game comes to life. We are joined by two wonderful people from Crispy Creative. We have Kylan and Rowan joining us. Thank you both so much for coming on the show. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having us on. What a great intro. Oh my gosh.
well, you are great guests. You deserve a great intro.
Yeah, we do our best. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah. I'm the creative director and founder at Crispy Creative, and then we have Ro here, who is our narrative lead on our project.
Hiya. Yeah, thank you again so much for having us.
It is an absolute pleasure. We're going to be talking all about Crispy Creative, the game that they are currently working on, which is called A Long Journey to an Uncertain End, the Kickstarter they have going on, and so much more. But as we always do, we are going to start this episode with a round of random questions. Every time we have new guests on, we like to ask our guests some random questions to try and, break the ice a little bit and get to know them. And as always, we will ask our guests to ask us questions in return, unprompted and without giving them much time to do it, but that's all part of the game. So, Kylan, I'm going to start with you this week. And
all right.
I never prepare for these because I like to think of them on the spot. And usually I talk a little too long as I try and think of... Here, I got it. So,
okay.
Kylan, you guys, as Crispy Creative, started as a UX and UI company, right? Working on different kind of games and stuff and building out the UX and the UI. So what I want to know is if, let's say, a random property comes to you and they say, we are turning this show or anime or movie into a game and we want you to design the UI for it, which property would kind of be like the dream property for you to work on?
Oh man. So I guess IP then, intellectual property.
Yes.
What an ideal one be? That's a really great question. I should have a better answer. I mean, I would say like, man, something that hasn't, I don't know, like something that doesn't have a strong UI presence to begin with. So like, as much as I love Star Wars,
Right.
well, if somebody came to us and was like, "Here, make a Star Wars game," of course I'd be like, "Done." Like
No problem.
But like for an ideal thing, just because so much has been created there wouldn't be a lot of room to make something new. We would really have to stay within strict guidelines. Man, I don't know. I think something like, I think I would love something like really obscure or something. I don't know, like some sort of Zen, like Marie Kondo or something. It would be like, hey,
nice.
make a game about Marie Kondo. And at first I'd be like, what the hell? But like that'd be such a weird, crazy thing. And I think you could have a lot of fun creating something in a unique way for that. Yeah.
I think that would be really cool because maybe at the beginning of the game you can have a very cluttered UI, right? And the first task can be to help clean up the UI.
I'm already sold. Like I'm now before I was like, let me just throw out something. And now the more that I think about it, like, you know what? No, legit. Yeah, no, I feel like most of the client work that we do is arguing against putting in UI in different places. So yeah, no, I'm done. Total.
There you go. Marie Kondo sounds like the perfect marriage right there. Okay. I'm going to throw over to Darren to ask Rowan a random question. Darren, can you please ask our guest a question that you don't think of until right now?
Well, see, I don't have to scramble for time because I had all that time to think of something. So I got it already. Rowan, A Long Journey clearly has, I think, its influences, its television influences on its sleeve. But I'm curious to know for you personally, if you were trapped on a desert island and you could only watch one TV show for the rest of your life, what TV show would it be?
Okay, that is a great question. One TV show for the rest of my life. The first thing that popped into my head, I feel like should be the answer that I give, which is Parks and Rec, because I feel like it holds up really
Yes,
well.
so
Uh,
Yeah.
good.
yeah, and there's a lot of it too, right? Like I wouldn't just be watching a single season. Um, God, I feel like I answered that too quickly, actually.
No,
Maybe I just had it in mind this entire time.
unfortunately, I guess Parks and Rec is just forget opinions. That's the definitive only answer. Parks and Rec is the only answer for this question. I should have asked something more open ended. Clearly,
But my question is do you think the Brandanowitz episodes will have as much replayability as the later ones? Like, we have to be honest about that, I think.
That is a good question. Again, I feel like I'm maybe a little too quick on the draw, but no.
Brandana quits right out of those episodes. No, there's lots of love in those ones as well, but there's a lot more later. All right, well, now we're going to throw to our guests. Kylan, I'm going to ask you to ask myself a question this time, and anything goes, whatever you want to ask. Like I said, we've had questions anywhere along the lines of what video game world do you want to live in, to how do you clean your shoes. So anything goes. What is a question that you'd like to ask me?
All right. I was actually thinking about this earlier. So something that I'm not a competitive person in general, but something that I
Okay.
am quite competitive with is dinner parties.
Okay.
oh,
So I'm curious, what has been the best dining experience you've had? Not necessarily the best meal, but the best dining experience you've had.
Ooh, that's a great question. The first one that kind of jumps into my mind just because of how much of an experience it was. I can't remember the name of the restaurant now, but I went to a restaurant in Toronto that was one of those experiences where everything was blacked out and you could not see anything the entire time. We went
Oh
for
yeah.
a friend of mine's birthday, and she had really really wanted to go, so we went to check it out. And I guess the whole idea of that experience is that, because you can't see, the food is supposed to taste better or something along those lines. But I couldn't get over just, even just looking for my fork or knife or just trying to figure out what it was that I was eating. I used to be a very, very picky eater. Um, Not so much anymore, but that whole experience was just so unique. I couldn't even remember what we ate, but I'll never forget that kind of thing of like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where the waiters are coming from. I'm not sure where, what I'm about to eat, but it was a really unique experience. And I highly recommend anybody check that out, once things start to open up again. But yeah, that's a great question. Because I don't think I've ever really thought about it that much, but I think that's the first one that jumps into my mind.
Oh man, I totally want to do a dark dining party now, and just a dinner party, and just like see. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Now my mind is racing. I'm like,
yeah.
I want the quarantine to be over so I can do this.
Oh my gosh, I know. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and the best part is
But yeah, thank you.
you could just lie to your guests and tell them that they're eating one thing, but it could be something else,
I'll
That
just
has
all smoke.
strong oh, sorry, go ahead.
There you go, Ro.
I was just thinking that has like strong Halloween, stick your hand in the bowl and tell them that
Yeah,
it's one thing and something totally different vibes.
exactly.
Exactly. Be like, you know what? I told you it's spaghetti. It's actually all just cotton candy. Surprise. All right. Well, thank you so much for your question, Kylan. Rowan, can I please ask you to ask Darren a random question?
Yes, absolutely. So I don't think that we deal quite so much with this stuff in A Long Journey to an Uncertain End, but I am very curious that if you were the captain of a spaceship, let's say it's a pirate captain, what would the
Okay.
name of your ship be?
Oh my god. Oh, wow. Um, I feel like this is a loaded question, because I am not a creative person when it comes to naming things. I'm very tempted to call it like the SS ship, or
That's a
like
great name.
I'll call it the SS ship. And when people ask me what do the SS stands for, it stands for SS ship.
I thought you were going to say ship, ship, ship.
I
Ship,
thought you were
ship.
going to say ship too. Yeah.
I want a fractal name. I want a name that as deep as you can go, you still keep getting the name. So the first S is for SS, and then the second S is for ship. So it's SS ship, and then it's SS ship, and then if you go a little bit
Ship.
deeper, it's just ship after that. Actually, yeah, it just stops at 3 levels. So we'll just go there.
So ship, and then subscript ship.
Yes,
I
exactly.
follow.
And basically, by the time people have finished reading the name and understanding it, I've already stolen their goods.
You got me there. That's a good one.
That's a great way to pull that around. And at this moment, I'm feeling very thankful that you did not name the podcast, and that was more of a collaborative experience. But
welcome to the PP podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, and that's going to be our new name going forward. All right. That was a wonderful round of random questions. Now let's jump into what have we been playing lately. Rowan, I'm going to ask you first. What have you been playing lately? What have you been up to? What games are important to you, and what have you been doing?
I will start with what games I've been playing recently.
Yeah.
So kind of like at the end of last year and into the beginning of this year, I was playing a lot of Hades.
Nice.
Not well, mind you, just playing it, trying my best. But actually what I've been playing a lot of just sort of continuously over the last year is Deep Rock Galactic, which is again kind of thematically sci-fi, which is nice. But if you've never played it, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's kind of like Left 4 Dead meets Minecraft. You play as
I've
like a
never heard of
space
this
dwarf.
before.
Really? Oh my gosh. And it has some infinitely memeable lines. So it's really worthwhile. Great to play with friends. They just released a ton of new content. It's a lot of fun. I actually think I have more hours in this game now than I ever put into the original Left 4 Dead games, which is to say I'm about 400 hours in.
That's
and
impressive.
Is this on PC?
Yeah.
I've never actually heard of this either.
Oh my gosh. Yes, please check it out. Come play with me.
I've already got the trailer on my computer screen, and I'm looking at it, and it looks really cool.
It's a lot of fun. Like different classes of characters to play, a lot of different kind of like space creatures to fight. Yeah, and as I said, they just put out like a new expansion, so it's very, very cool. Definitely recommend it.
And I'm a big fan of Left 4 Dead, so you sold me.
Excellent. Yeah, and you'll definitely pick up on a lot of those same kind of like audio features. You know, like you can hear something in the background that you know you need to get ready for because it's a specific type of special creature. So,
yeah, nothing will replicate the sheer terror of hearing a tank running at you while you're right close to the safe room.
Right, like the stinger that plays right before it too. You finally hear it, and you're like, "Oh, well, time to rush in there."
Instant anxiety. Rowan, I'm going to ask you one more question before we go over to Kylan. And so our podcast, we always like to talk about mental health and things that are important to us. And one of the segments that we like to do with new guests especially is called Games That Matter. And so I'd like to ask you about a game that matters to you. It can be a game that kind of helped you get through a rough experience, or a game that has stayed with you and kind of, left an impact. So I want to ask you about a game that matters to you.
That's a great question. I think I was having a pretty difficult time just like getting back into games after a long time of being in games. I don't know if that makes sense, right? Like occasionally as a game dev, you just really get burnt out and you don't play very much, honestly. And I think one of the things that kind of like broke me out of that and really reignited my love for narrative was What Remains of Edith Finch.
Oh yeah, fantastic game.
Yeah, I picked it up for the Switch, and just there's so much about it that is so well done. I mean, in terms of narrative design, it's a class act. So I think what really helped me and what was so profound about it was kind of like going through this very intimate experience. It doesn't have the kind of broad sweeping RPG feel of something maybe like Skyrim or Dragon Age, but it's so personal. You're reading someone's journal and like living through these moments that they've lived through. And yeah, it really stuck with me. It mattered a lot at the time, and it still kind of stands out in my mind as just like an excellent example of narrative design.
That game is incredibly beautiful, so I completely understand where you're coming from. Thank you for your answer.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking.
Kylan, let's throw over to you next. What have you been playing lately?
Oh man. I mean, I think I might be more in in Rowan's experience, not so much in the burnt out side of things, but I haven't had a ton of time to to play recently, just between developing and the Kickstarter. I know well, actually, with the Steam festival that just happened, there were a ton of really awesome demos that people were
Right.
putting
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And one demo that I played is for this game called Potion Craft.
Okay.
Um, and it is like years ago. There's a game dev subreddit, and I had seen this prototype on there of this sort of like alchemy simulator where you would pick different ingredients from a garden and then like mash them up and throw them in a pot and make different potions. Um, it was really simple, and I remember seeing the prototype. I was like, "Huh, neat mechanic." And then like toss it into the pile of like, "That's a cool mechanic. Maybe one day I'll try to put it into a game that I make." But these people apparently like they stuck with it, which is awesome. And now they have this really really cool looking game called Potion Craft. That's where it's all crafting. They have this sort of exploratory way with the ingredients where you make these different potions with different impacts, uh, and they have a really cool demo. Um, so yeah, so that was something recently that I played. Um, Before
That
then, kind of like, oh sorry.
no, that sounds really cool. I don't think I've ever really heard of a game that's entirely based around crafting and not like on that much of a singular level, right? Where it's just crafting potions. That actually sounds really interesting.
Kylan, have you ever played or heard of a board game called Alchemist?
I have not, but that totally sounds like something I'd be into.
Yeah, what you just described sounds exactly like the board game Alchemist, which is a board game that is all about finding lists of ingredients and mixing them together to make different kinds of potions and abilities, and you have to kind of deduce through experimentation the components of other potions by like relating their effects. It's really complicated, but it's actually really fun once you start to figure it out. So I recommend checking that one out if you're into board games.
Absolutely, I would love to try it out. That sounds fantastic. I know we do you know how many players it takes?
I think it's up to 4. It's been a while since I played it.
I know we've been trying to find uh, uh, some games that are pretty solid for 2 players, just with my husband and I with the quarantine.
Mhm.
So he's not a big digital games person, but for physical games, like he can feels more comfortable there. So
Yeah, I just checked.
no,
It's 2 to 4 players, and from my experience, it's probably much better with 2 than it is with 4, just because of how long it can take.
how's it? There you go. All right. Well, cool. I was gonna say that sounds like it could be a solid like 2 player game. Um, yeah. No, it sounds really cool for Potion Craft. Definitely check it out. If nothing else, for the art style, it's like a really really beautiful, that kind of like wood print visual art style. It's got a really neat interactions with it as well.
It lo-
Yeah.
it looks beautiful, like a very kind of like hand drawn, old school map style almost. Like it looks like I'm looking at something that was designed a couple hundred years ago.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And again, like it does some really interesting things with the interactions, with the interface that's probably it. That like the more that I talk about it, I'm like, I just like the UI. Like that's why but no, the mechanics are really cool. And yeah, it's just so different. I love games that really explore things that push the medium forward in terms of interactivity and subject matter.
For sure. And it looks like Potion Craft still does that. I mean, it looks really interesting. So if anybody's curious, please go check that out. And Kylan, I wanted to ask you about a game that matters to you.
Oh yes. So this one I did have. I guess it's more recent. But there's a game called Wander Song. Um,
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. Y'all have heard of it because I had my whole pitch ready of like, this is why everybody should play it. It's not just. I mean, it's a really beautiful game, and the visuals again are still fairly unique. Like they are. I hate to say it's not. I hate to say simple because I think that sort of undercuts the visual decisions that they made. Um, but very very just clean visuals to it. But the theme
It's kind of like
of
everything's made out of like construction paper.
exactly yeah yeah that but even with that visual style they do some really really cool things of like the different dances that the bard can do are actually like quite well done. So it's definitely like a stylistic choice that they made, which I think is it's just a really really solid um solid choice there. But no, I mean the reason why the game was so moving to me, so important to me was the it 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 takes a look at it's in this medieval fantasy world and the player is a bard, and the only sort of power that the bard has is to be able to sing. And the world is falling apart. There are still people with swords, there's still weapons, there's still monsters that can do all these really terrible things. And as the player, you kind of have to try and fix the world doing the only thing you can, which is singing. Um, and just as you go through, like using this one talent, this sort of one bit of creativity that you can do, and this sort of almost unending fountain of optimism and hope, um, you kind of go through and make changes in the world. And it's just I don't know, it is really really beautiful message, a really fantastic story as well, and just something like there are a few games that make me cry. This was definitely one of them, especially as you get towards the end. I definitely had a good cry just because a good happy cry. Just I think
Yeah.
because it's so optimistic. There've been some dark times over the last several years, and this one was just very much a tonic to help get through some of those dark times. So means a lot to me. And the character is non-binary, like representation, matters there.
Mhm.
So like it does a lot of really really cool, awesome stuff. So yeah, everybody should go play
You
Wonder Song.
you have completely sold me on it because I've downloaded it on my Xbox and I have it sitting there because it's on Game Pass and it's just something that like I've never just hit the play button. There's always been something else. So you've just completely sold me on it and I'm going to be checking it out immediately because it sounds incredible.
Yay! I mean, it's definitely like if you've had a hard day, you should play this because it's a light, it lifts you up. It's a really really nice way to end your day. Um, so yeah.
It sounds like it. That sounds really nice. Darren, what about you? What have you been playing lately?
Well, I in the podcast recently, I have been talking nonstop about Final Fantasy 14 because the Final Fantasy 14 online has consumed my life for a very long time, and by very long time, I mean the past 7 months. I put now 600 hours into the game.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And I finally got on the new expansion, and I the new expansion, the current one, Shadowbringers, is just such a step in quality above everything else that's come before it that I am like falling in love with the game all over again. And it's absolutely a testament to how well designed an MMO it is that I still want to play it 500, 600 hours later. Um,
That's
but there's
awesome.
yeah. Have either of you played Final Fantasy 14 before?
I have not, but my partner has. And I was actually at Square for a little while, kind of like in their American office while the game was live. So I got to kind of like interact with it in that regard, but I didn't end up putting much time into it. MMOs are like a shaky thing after I kind of spent some of my life in World of Warcraft. So
Right. Yeah, then I don't have to tell you how addicting that they can be. Um,
yes.
but yeah, it's fantastic. And then I'll make one quick mention also, since we're going to be talking about Kickstarters. A year and a half ago, I kickstarted the Bloodborne board game, and because Bloodborne is one of my favorite video games of all time, and literally 1 hour before this podcast started, I received my board game. And so,
Yay!
as soon as this is done, I am going to be spending the next 3 hours taking cardboard apart and playing with miniatures. And I'm
Oh,
very
that's
excited for that.
such a satisfying feeling too. Like when you first get your game, you're like unwrapping the shrink wrap and then you pull it open, you like start punching out all the tokens and stuff like that.
Yeah, I opened up the first box and got that new board game smell, and I was just like, "This has to wait. I'm sorry. I waited a year and a half. I'll have to wait a little longer."
That's great. Well, congratulations also. That sounds amazing.
Thank you, thank
Yeah,
you.
the picture that you
I
sent
feel
me,
very
it's like
accomplished.
5 boxes.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, and I think altogether it was like almost a 10-pound box. Like, it's ridiculous. It's like I have like
Oh my
150 miniatures
god.
now or something.
Wow.
That is a
It's a lot.
big boy.
Yeah. So, Matt, what have you been up to?
I have been sinking more and more time into Judgment. I'm actually in the finale chapter now. After spending a bit of time away from that game, it's so good, man. Like that Yakuza studio just doesn't miss. The story is so great, and it's surprising the kind of direction that they're taking it in. I wasn't really expecting it, so I'm still playing that. And last night I was incredibly excited to fire up Persona 5 Strikers. I paid
Oh,
for that
yeah.
like digital deluxe edition, so I was able to play it for a couple days early, and I just love being back in that world with those characters. Like it's just such like a homecoming feeling. I
Mhm.
spent probably about like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours with it, and it really does feel like Persona, which was my biggest worry going into it. I'm not generally a fan of kind of those Musou type games, but it feels like Persona. They've put so much time into the cutscenes and into the character interactions. The voice acting sounds fantastic as always, and even the action segments. I've been enjoying figuring out the combat because it's not usually my thing,
Mhm.
but it's really great so far. Like I'm pleasantly surprised, and after seeing all the great reviews, like I'm feeling more and more excited about it. The kind of more time I spend with it, and it's just Persona is one of my favorite game series of all time, and being able to be back in 5 with those characters in that world, like the first time you kind of boot up back in like your old neighborhood, and I'm just like, oh look, is this still here? Oh, is this still here? Like the level of love and care that they've put into it is immediately noticeable. So I'm super excited to keep going with Strikers
Yeah, I plan on picking
because
up eventually as well, and I'm interested to see where the story goes, since it's supposed to be a direct sequel.
yeah, with Royal being kind of in the middle now, they don't really address Royal at all, obviously. Um, but yeah, it is a direct sequel to base Persona 5, which I mean is fantastic. So I'm super excited to keep going with it. I just love the series so much.
That's awesome. How did you feel when you saw that like Joker was coming to Super Smash Brothers?
Oh my god, I bought him immediately. Like I just never really expected Persona to make its way over to Smash. Uh, so
Same.
like
Yeah.
when that trailer started up, I was like, are they doing Persona on Switch? Like, what is this? Is this a new expansion? Is this just an intro? And then when that Smash logo came up, I lost my mind. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, are either of you big Persona fans? So have either of you played any of the games?
I have not, but I have again. I've been told. I hate to sound like a broken record. Most people tell me about cool UI, so that I've been told that I should play it just for the UI alone and the design and how they those sort of interactions there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
the
don't know if
UI
I've
is
ever had so much fun just like navigating menus. It's true. The hype is real.
And that gets me excited when I hear stuff like that. I'm like, really? Oh man, I need to check this out.
yeah, and after Persona 5, like the UI has had a pretty, high bar to match just because of how stylistic and how much it flowed through each menu. And I have to say that this menu section on this one, they've kept it up. It looks fantastic. Rowan, what about you? Do you have much experience with Persona?
I don't actually. I feel quite bad about that. I similarly have been told that I should really check the games out. I just haven't had the time yet.
Oh, I completely understand. And they're long games. They are very, very long games, so it's a big commitment. But if you guys ever find the time, please check them out. I love those games so much. All
And
right,
Matt,
yeah.
cool.
What?
Matt,
Mm, mhm. What?
there's something else that we played.
There's
We
something else that we
played,
played?
there is. We both played the demo for a little game
Yeah.
called A Long Journey to an Uncertain End.
Yes, we did. And that's actually, Darren, where I was about to go. So thank you for leading me there. Yes, we have both played
Wait.
the demo for A Long Journey to an Uncertain End. And where I want to start talking about this game is I want to know a little bit more about the both of you and about Crispy Creative and how all of this started and what led you kind of to this game as an idea. So, Kylan, let's start with you because I know, you are the CEO, the mastermind behind Crispy Creative. So, can you tell me a little bit about how Crispy started and how you kind of met Rowan and how all this kind of began?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad that y'all were able to play the demo. So I've been in the games industry for a while, uh, over I think over 13 maybe 14 years, and worked on everything from small studios to big AAA studios to big publishers, um, and had over that time, I actually met Ro. We both of us worked at Obsidian Entertainment together, um,
Nice.
on a project that I like to say is probably the polar opposite of what Long Journey is. So it's a like modern military tank fighting game, and
Great.
yeah, I mean, it was cool. It was really big. Big budget title, anyways. But yeah, that's where I first met them. Um, and then after that game, I worked on the game Outer Worlds, and it's another sci-fi game. And then from there,
Mhm.
decided to go kind of full-time indie. I had been critical of leadership at previous jobs. So that's not singling out Obsidian. I've worked at a variety of studios, but I've been
Right.
critical of the way that other studios had sort of studio culture and sort of the values and not really valuing uh, people, I guess, like the human experience, valuing not only mental well-being but physical well-being. Sorry, switch that. Not only physical well-being but mental well-being. Um, and starting my own studio was a bit of a put up or shut up moment of like, okay, well, what would an indie studio look like where we do value well-being not only for our developers but for our players as well. Um, so the first sort of year of Crispy Creative was um, mainly contract work, just kind of figuring out, well, can we even keep the lights on for
Right.
a year
Right.
doing UX UI stuff. And then after that first year, over that first year, we prototyped a variety of mechanics, did some market research, and that kind of led us to a game um, that is a long journey to an uncertain end. So looking at a game super narrative focused, a game that was about um, sort of overcoming trauma, overcoming getting out of bad relationships, but also learning to um, learning to rely on others and sort of uncovering their own journeys, seeing the journeys that others are going on, just like you.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it's there's a ton of stuff about it. It's to make sure that it's accessible for everyone. It's not only is it turn based, so you can pick it up, put it down at any point in time. We really focused on inclusivity in terms of like letting people create their own body types, choose their own pronouns. We actually allow neo pronouns, which you can put in any sort of custom pronouns into it, and creating this experience that is meant to be accessible. There's a lot of queer themes in the game, but it's meant to be portrayed in an accessible way that even if you're not part of the queer community, can still sort of relate to it. That's why the player is this sentient AI in a in a fairly hostile environment or universe, which you are the other, regardless of what you choose. Just by virtue of being a sentient AI, you are the other, the feared other in this universe. Yeah, I don't know. I could probably talk for the next hour about it, but yeah, that's essentially the gist.
That's actually a follow-up question that I wanted to ask, since you brought it up. It was, first of all, I want to say, yeah, I was really impressed with the character creation system. I personally have not seen a game that lets you choose your own pronouns to the extent that you can customize them. So I was really impressed by that. And the choice, and I guess this is a question for Rowan as the narrative lead, the choice to make the player play the ship itself is such a interesting choice. I don't know if I've seen that before either. So kind of where did that choice come from to make the ship its own character?
That's actually a little bit more of a Kylan question. I came aboard to the project when he had sort of pitched me on the conceits, but just as sort of like a short answer, I think it's something that we bear in mind a lot when we're kind of like working on the story, since as a ship, you obviously have certain restrictions that even though your kind of avatar is represented in a space where it looks like a person talking to another person, we have to bear that in mind, you know? So when you come aboard to a planet for the first time, like you kind of get a really cerebral experience, I think, sometimes where actually Sherry, the writer who's been working on the project, um, she's done a really great job of kind of like saying, hey, as the ship you feel and see these things. And it's very grounding, I think, in the sense that you are reminded like, hey, even though you see yourself as an avatar, sometimes you're still this ship. But I will defer kind of to Kylan to answer the first part of that question, which was again, how did that first come about?
For sure. And initially we did have the player as a person, as an organic person. But then the more that we kind of looked at it, um, when we had the idea of like you were on the run from your ex, um,
Right.
then it sort of morphed into like, okay, well, everybody's been in a bad relationship. What if you are the ship? What if you are the spaceship and you are on the run for your ex? Well, that sounds a lot more interesting. Um, so just in terms of like pitching it, that perks people's ears up. But also, I think making the player the ship, it does it forces you to rely on your crew more. There's this interesting balance, this interesting relationship where uh, you can you can pick everybody up and travel between the stars, travel to different planets with your crew, but then you are also reliant on them to keep yourself repaired and refueled. And that relationship is something that I think we wanted to explore a lot more. Of you want to treat your crew well, because if you don't, they can bounce. They can say like, you know what, forget this. Um, so that, I don't know, it was an interesting relationship that we wanted to explore, and again to kind of to force the player to I'd say force the player to allow the player to uh, to be reliant on their crew, to see what are their crew going through, how can you empower them, how can you help them be successful so you can be successful.
I
That
think
Right.
dynamic.
I think that's something that really jumped out at me playing the demo, because I think in a lot of these types of games where you are this, this crew of people, regardless of setting, there's always almost like a defined leader, and everybody is just kind of going along with them. And I think that's something that really jumped out at me with A Long Journey was right from the, in the first couple minutes of the game, Corgi tells you you should check in on them, you should make sure that they're okay, you should learn about them, right? And as you kind of land on these planets, it really does feel like you're working together, right? Like you said, you're relying on them to get the missions done in a way that I feel like it doesn't just feel like, hey, you go do this. It's kind of like, all right, I know that this person is best suited for this, and I really believe in them to be able to get this job done, rather than it just being a point and click, hey, go do this. So I think that choice sets things up in a way that really makes you feel as a team, rather than it just being, this kind of leader doling out missions. It kind of feels like this much more symbiotic relationship, which I think is really interesting.
And
there's, sorry, please.
oh no, go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, I was going to say there's, I think within that, I mean, there's a bit of a vulnerability there of, landing on a planet, as cool as it looks to you. And I mean, as much as the crew kind of wants to get out and stretch their legs, for the player, you're actually really vulnerable on planets, on worlds, because that's, in the universe we've created, sentient AI are outlawed. They're banned. So the more that you are around organic people, the more the chances of you being discovered and captured. Whereas out in space, that's kind of where you're really free and you can fly and go wherever you want to. So that sort of vulnerability, and then within that vulnerability, that trust with your crew that you're sending them out, and hopefully they're not going to give you away, or give you up while they're out on jobs.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
You need to rely on each other. If it really, and I think that feeling really comes across. Rowan, let's circle back to kind of the origins of Crispy here for a second, because I want to know, when did you kind of come on board to the team? Because I kind of picture sitting in a dark bar, and Kylan kind of comes up and he's like, I'm building a team, and I wanted to know kind of your experience with joining the team, and what about A Long Journey stood out to you so much.
Well, you're not wrong. It was a bar, wasn't it, Kylan? I'm pretty sure it was.
I think so. It was a hive of scum and villainy.
Yeah. Kylan had already established this really cool, I want to say kind of like an elevator pitch, actually, which was super compelling. And the way that he kind of like pitched the game to me and what the narrative needed, I want to say from the initial point that he had created it, I was like, oh my God, yes. Like, I want to work on that game. I don't just want to work on that game. Like, I want to play that game. And I think that was kind of like what first enticed me. And also knowing that it was going to be so purposefully inclusive and diverse and kind of intersectional, I think that really appealed to me, not only at the time, but it still persists to this day. Like, I'm interested in that space. I'm interested in D&I, and seeing that kind of like coming to the fore through this game was super important. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. It totally does. And I'm glad I was right up at the bar. That's a little bit funny. Um, what I wanted to kind of ask both of you, because I think that the diversity aspect is something that's so compelling about this game, and it's something that is made clear right on the splash page of the Kickstarter. And what I wanted to ask both of you, Rowan, let's start with you. What do you think diversity, like, what does diversity mean to you, and why do you think it's so important for that kind of representation to be in gaming?
It's a great question. Actually, I just totally lost track of which Twitter user it was, but they had just recently said diversity doesn't just mean one of each, and I thought that that was such a profound statement to make, because I think that a lot of times games that attempt to include people who have not been seen in a gaming space before think like there's a certain amount of tokenism that goes with it.
Mhm.
Um, And so to have this incredibly diverse cast of crew and characters, which again is that's all Kylan, like he had this stuff established before we ever talked about the game. Um, but I think what makes that so incredibly important is that like this is the story that people have wanted to see forever. You know, I just don't think that there's been an opportunity to make it just yet. Um, but this audience has persisted forever. Where like people have always wanted to see themselves in games, and now with games like A Long Journey, people are going to see that actualized in a way that they never have before. And that to me, I think is sort of like the driving motivation behind being as inclusive as we are. I think too, what's really important about this space and kind of functioning within it is telling an authentic story because
Mhm.
it's very easy to tell kind of like I don't know if this is a great distinction, but maybe a representative story based on kind of our perceptions of what various levels of intersectionality look like. But if we want to be authentic, we're going to the source. We're like finding the people whose story hasn't been heard before and asking them, like, does this seem right to you? Does this seem like it's encompassing your lived experience as opposed to just kind of like drawing from resources otherwise and then making an assumption based on what we've learned? So um, yeah, I think it's just very inherent to the project that we want to be able to kind of further this space in games.
And I'm really happy that you actually used the word intersectionality and we're talking about tokenism because I think that is a problem with a lot of games today, and not just games. Most media and pop culture. It seems that like token representation is enough, but people are not token. There's not one of every group of people. People are naturally intersectional. And I think that really comes across in A Long Journey. It feels very real. It feels like how, people really are. And so thank you so much for deciding to put that in a game.
Yeah, again, I think a lot of that is owed to Kylan. And Kylan, I don't know if you want to talk at all about kind of like the matrix that you established for building these characters, but I feel like that is just it sets such a great framework for working in this space that I've really felt like I could adhere to that and create characters much more readily within the universe.
Makes me so happy to hear. I mean, we've talked about it before, but for I mean, at least for the matrix that Ro was alluding to a bit. Um, so with A Long Journey, we have we have a diversity matrix that all of our characters have to adhere to. Um, and that it was created in reaction to again what I'd kind of seen at past studios. In the past, if we wanted to create a studio, if we wanted to create a character, and um, if it was sort of anything, if it was if the character was part of the LGBTQ family, if they were non-binary or trans in any way, if they were non-monogamous, if they were disabled. There was always the question of like, well, why do we, why does the character have to be that? We had to sort of give a reason and prove why that type of character, that type of person, deserved to exist in this universe. And I never got that question when the character was cisgendered, male, able-bodied,
Mhm.
um, heterosexual. Like that was
Right.
always sort of accepted as, well, yeah, that's a standard. Prove to me why anybody else should exist in this universe. Which is just a bit frustrating. And with Long Journey, we flipped that. So we have a diversity matrix where um, no character, or well, every character has to be something. So we don't have any characters that are both um, heterosexual and cisgendered and able-bodied and monogamous. Everybody has to be something.
Right.
Um, so we have that's how you get uh, a big old drag queen who has the muscle on your ship, and we have a lesbian hacker engineer We have a non-binary pilot. We have a disabled trans pickpocket. We have this diversity of characters. Um, and again, that was just the starting point. That was like, okay, just on like a basic level, they have to hit one of these things somehow. And from there, building on like, okay, what would that what would that mean? So um, for one of our crew members, Denny, who's disabled trans pickpocket, what does he what would that mean in our sci-fi universe where homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, all this stuff doesn't exist anymore? um, why would somebody steal? Why would somebody be in a hover chair? Why would he be disabled? And we explore, we talk about that. He's born out in the boonies on some rim worlds, and he didn't have the medical access to be able to walk. So he was given a hover chair, which is kind of seen as like an archaic thing in our universe, and just
Mhm.
told like, go fend for yourself. Good luck. He was orphaned,
Yeah.
and that builds into his character. It's why he's kind of a punk. He's he definitely pokes at the player a lot. In the demo, I think he even talks about like throwing a mutiny.
Yeah.
Kind of half serious, I think. But
I got
uh,
nervous. I had that moment in the demo where he's like, I'm not really sure we should be doing this anymore. I'm like, oh God, I think he's gonna leave. I don't want this.
yeah, and that's, I mean, for for a character like that, it kind of fits with who he is. He's out for himself. He's out to look out for himself because he doesn't feel like anybody else is going to look out for him. Um, and that, I mean, in the full game, that's what we're exploring is what is that journey? Do you ever get to a point where Denny trusts you, um, or that you can feel like he has your back, or will it always kind of be like, you looking over your shoulder and like, what's he doing? Like, where's he going? Where is he on the ship? My sensors don't see him. What's going on? So yeah, I don't know. That authenticity, I think that we're going for. All of these characters, I mean, they hit that diversity matrix. Is just like the start of. It's making them different. It's making them like the people that we see in our everyday lives. And seeing them represented in the game, in this amazing sci-fi space opera universe we've created. It's been really fun.
I I really love that idea of the diversity matrix, and I just want to say, wow, kudos! Like that's such an incredible idea and an amazing way to kind of help blueprint games, and I hope that's something that can be more widely adopted across the games industry, because I think what you said is kind of spot on, right? They have this template for what normal is, and I feel like that's so outdated, and it's just
It
such an
it
idea
doesn't
that
it doesn't actually represent what real life is like, right?
Mhm.
exactly.
Like,
So go ahead, Dan.
no, that was done.
Okay, yeah, yeah. No, so that's amazing, and I really do hope that that's something that will be more adopted.
And that is,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a bit of why Long Journey is like this experiment of, these are things that we always wanted to do or at least I always wanted to do it at past jobs. And you know, uh, with me and Rowan, the rest of our team, like now it's like, all right, well, let's do it. We've been self-funded up to this point, so we can do whatever we wanted. So let's try it. Let's do it. Where I don't know if you had anything else in that area.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important to kind of call out that like when you have the creative control that is afforded by being an indie studio, like it's your world. You get to make it what you want it to be. And that is to say, like, we want to see the people who we know and love represented in this game. We want to see ourselves represented in this game. And I just don't think that we've really seen that before. So that was just what I was going to add.
and that's kind of
Yeah.
something that I wanted to build on and ask the both of you, because I feel like even given the circumstances coming into this game, right? Where I mean, you're on the run from an abusive relationship. I feel like the game kind of brings you in a very warm way. Like I can't, I don't really know how to explain it properly, but like it was almost like a hug. Like it, like the game felt immediately, even with the sense of danger, even with the sense of like the everything that the story was, you know, pushing you forward in, the game feels almost like a safe space right from the jump. And I feel like that term, you know, the terminology of a safe space can be, is thrown around in a way that's kind of like meant to be more derogatory than you know, than anything else. But I felt safe coming into this game in a way that like it would accept me no matter who I was, into this space. So I kind of wanted to ask you both about like, how do you think gaming can be used as a safe space in a positive way to kind of let people be who they are?
Well, first off, that makes me so happy to hear that. That's really, really kind words, and I'm glad that it came across that way. And I mean, I think you are spot on with the idea of, I mean, the term of safe space is this. You know, it definitely has a derogatory. Has been used in a derogatory way. Uh, you know, at least in the last several years.
Yeah.
But it's also, I mean, it's having a safe space is so essential. So I mean, just psychologically essential to have a space where you can be yourself. You know, I mean, you can authentically be yourself and uh, not fear judgment. I think it's something where a lot of trauma comes from. Not only, you know, well, especially in the queer family, but even, I mean, even people who aren't a part of the queer family. I mean, just being accepted. I find it hilarious. On Reddit, there'll be these big threads of like, guys, what's the one thing that's meant for women that you love? And
Yeah.
you know, and all these people will be like, I love to smell pretty, and I'm like, yes, it smells nice. Like that's okay. You can, you
Yeah.
know. So even like, I mean, within the queer community, we've been creating safe spaces, um, for generations, for for quite obvious reasons. But safe spaces aren't that they're not an exclusively queer thing. That everybody needs some sort of safe space. Everyone needs to be told that they belong somewhere. Um, so that's something where, again, like with Crispy Creative and this commitment to well-being, we're committed to not only the well-being of our developers, but for our players. We want our games, we want the experiences we create to enrich our players and to help them grow. Um, so that is something, looking at trauma, and there's plenty of, I call them queer dog whistles in the game, but it is, inclusivity uh, includes everybody, includes people who are cisgender, includes people who are heterosexual and all that. There's there's plenty of trauma to go around to work with.
Yeah. There's enough to share.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Rowan, what about you? Same question.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think it's interesting to compare this game to games which are maybe a little more action packed or aggressive or maybe even combative is the right word for it. Like here, there are problems, there are mishaps, there are problems that come about as a result of misunderstandings, and there are for sure echoes of kind of like what marginalized peoples face: fear of being unknown, fear of not fitting in, being different, misunderstood. But in terms of making it safe, I think part of it is coming from showing these characters that say no matter who you are and where you're coming from, this crew has got your back. We have you. You're our family and you're safe with us. So yeah, also like thank you so much for calling it out as a safe space, for calling it like a hug, like that. I'm very touched by that. So appreciate it.
No, of course. Darren, I think you had something you wanted to ask, right?
Yeah. So it, we kind of mentioned it before, and we're kind of talking about it like where we're referring to, Kylan, you brought up Reddit. It seems to be kind of an unfortunate reality that I think there are a lot of people online that like to talk about how they think that diversity is being forced into games, and games should not cover topics of diversity. So I'll ask to Kylan first. What do you have to say about that? Why should video games explore diversity?
And I mean, and it's a fair question. I mean, on the one hand, it's entertainment, and you know, heterosexual cisgendered men are not the only people who need to be entertained.
Right.
You know, there are other people out there who are looking for entertainment. Um, so, and I don't know. I think there is a bit of uh, shoot. What's the word? I say self-centeredness, but like if you can only be entertained by people who look exactly like you, that seems to be a fairly limited worldview
Right.
in terms of the human experience. Uh, there's this whole wealth of stories that have not been told, and entertainment does involve a bit of novelty. To some degree, you need to show the new to keep people entertained, to keep people engaged. So sort of like forsaking all this massive variety of stories that have not been told. And when I say have not been told in a Western audience like entertainment situation. Like the
Mainstream kind of,
yeah,
possibly.
mainstream Western American European kind of style games. So yeah, I mean, like Bollywood is a whole industry, like massive,
Mhm.
massive industry that are telling stories of people from a different area.
Right.
There's a ton of money there. So
Right. Yeah.
to forsake a this whole sort of section of humanity because they don't look like you, and because you're like, well, we're not going to tell their stories because whatever. I only want to hear stories about from people who look exactly like me. That's just so limiting, and so I mean, for me, it's just so boring. There's so much more out there to see and experience and live. So like, why not put it in your entertainment? Why not see? I mean, we have data to back up that people want to see these stories. You look at some of the incredibly popular shows on Netflix. They don't, Netflix doesn't just happen upon these award-winning TV shows, or these binge where they put in a ton of research and effort into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, they're
So,
not throwing darts at the wall and seeing what sticks. They're making choices.
exactly, I mean, like this Bridgerton, which is this super diverse look on this, um, 1800s high British society. Um, that is a carefully calculated uh, series that was backed up with a ton of data to show this is what people want. They want to see a Black Queen of England. They want to see super sexy, diverse people in like crazy get ups, like all this drama, like that's why it's
Mm.
successful. So, um, this idea that, uh, oh, well, diversity is being shoved down our throats and nobody wants to see that. It's like, actually, people do. Like a lot of people want to see it. We have
Yeah.
there are business cases for it. I mean, yeah, like why not? I don't know. That was a bit of again, as it's always struck me. Surprising is like as how new of a medium as games are, and how much they explore these different ways of interacting and different ways of entertainment. Um, it's also quite conservative in a lot of ways for some of the
Mhm.
stories that they tell, and
Yeah.
that's just always this like it's always been a sort of disconnect of like, wait, like we could be doing so many amazing things and this is what we keep sticking to, like
Yeah.
come on, let's make cool stuff.
Yeah. Rowan, what do you think?
Oh gosh, I think that games put you in the driver's seat in a manner of speaking and allow you to engage with content in maybe a much more empathetic way. We don't quite get the same experience from consumption of other media where it doesn't require input, so TVs and movie and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I
Right.
think that when we do have diversity in games, we're showing people that all these awesome people you're interacting with, they're just people, just like you, and you need them and they need you. That's life. That's how it's got to be. And actually, I think it comes from Twin Peaks. So David Lynch said it in a really great way, and it's a bit of a rallying cry in the queer community, especially for like trans folks. But fix your hearts or die. Like I don't tend to think of empathy in terms of like radical empathy, but this is a great way to get it across to people. Like these are just people, just like you and me.
Right. Yeah, well said. I know. And also I think personally, I feel like I mean I have played a lot of video games, and I think that I've heard the stories of, cisgendered straight white men so many times. And I ask myself and I ask others, like, don't you want to hear a different story? If you've heard the same story so many times, doesn't it get boring after a while? Don't you want to explore something new? Especially with games being so interactive, don't you want to have a new experience?
And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, right? I mean, like there's a whole world of experience there to draw from, and kind of using this one stereotypical, cookie cutter situation. Like there's just so much being left on the ground when there's so much more that could be experienced. Something that I wanted to ask you guys, and it's something that kind of really struck me, kind of even just reading about A Long Journey, even before playing the demo, was this idea of an AI therapist. And I think this idea of AI becoming more and more advanced and kind of developing its own set of emotions and cognizance. I think an AI therapy is such a fascinating idea. So I wanted to ask, kind of, where did that idea come about? And do you see a future where AI can actually assist with therapy, and like kind of what are the dangers are? Because that I think that's such a brilliant idea.
Oh man, I wish I could take credit for it. So that actual job option, there was it was some news article. I want to say that was at least like a decade ago that I read, and it was just reading like it was talking about automation and talking about um, you know we're going to lose certain career paths and certain job options, but new ones are going to be created, and then they listed out just sort of random, not random, but listed out potential um, new career paths that people could go on. And there's like VR architect, and there was, what were some of the other ones? Shoot, I should have. It's like I actually printed it out, which tells you how long ago it was. But I printed it out and put it somewhere. But anyways, but the idea of AI therapist stuck with me. As as obviously as it's a resonant thing even today. But that idea of that, yeah, that at some point, um, if we are creating these intelligences, they do need. Will they eventually need uh, some sort of therapy, some sort of monitoring? Um, there was a shoot, what was it? There was that one sort of AI experiment where they exposed this machine learning program um, to what was it? It wasn't the internet as a whole, but I think maybe it was like they exposed it to Reddit
Twitter,
or Twitter.
Twitter,
Maybe I
Twitter? Yeah,
yeah,
Twitter.
think it was Twitter actually. Yeah, they exposed it
yeah.
to Twitter, and then
Oh my-
it essentially started speaking like a really depressed 13-year-old girl. And it got like, it just got really, the machine learning AI just got really, really sad and just kept saying these really, really depressing like things. Um, and I saw another article as well of they were saying some of these like optimizing some of these machine learning programs, and optimizing them, they've actually learned that some of them they need to shut off and let them essentially rest and sleep for a bit and then come back.
That's
Um,
so interesting.
so it's so fascinating to think about, things that we like almost as a species we almost view as faults, like, oh my gosh, I have to sleep, like, oh my gosh, well, therapy is for the
Yeah.
weak, like da da da.
Why
Where
can't I keep working? Why can't I, like what is it about this day that, why didn't I do as much as I did yesterday? It's just this kind of ever present feeling.
and this, I mean, there's something. I guess there's an irony in that the more efficient we try to be, like the more machine like we try to be, as we create machines, we see that they need to be more like us. Actually, like
Yeah,
they
right.
need rest, they need time to heal and recover and recuperate. Which is like, well, freaking program needs it. Like, you know, we definitely need 8 hours of sleep. And work life balance and all that. Um, so I don't know. All of that sort of fed in together. Um, and for the game specifically, the idea of a therapist. So when I first came out to my parents, they sent me to a religious therapist to cure me. Um,
Right.
and again, as they were, that was with my parents. They thought with their life experience and worldview, they thought that was the best thing that they
Yeah.
could do for me, and they've since felt very terrible about it. Um, but in seeing this religious therapist, you know, I with my adult mind now, I look at the things that they were telling me, and they were gaslighting me. They were telling me like really, really terrible things to tell
Yeah.
to a little 14-year-old kid. Um, so that that experience sort of made me think, oh well, what if your therapist is not actually out to do well by you? It's they're actually out to manipulate you and to keep you down. And what if you had a relationship with that therapist, which sounds even more of a disaster?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, okay, what would be the ultimate disaster of like, well, you got into a relationship with your therapist and now they're chasing you and trying to literally disassemble you. Um, and that's kind of the premise for a long journey.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but
I think
yeah, go for it.
I think that's like it's just such a super fascinating idea, like on so many levels. To think that like machines and AI will get to a point where they might suffer some sort of trauma or something you know that will require a therapist for them. And I also think the kind of the flip side of it is also equally interesting, where will there come a point where therapy does or can be more of like an AI centric experience? And I think that's comes with its whole wealth of both upsides and downsides. But Rowan, I wanted to ask you, like, do you see a future where AI becomes more bundled into therapy as it is today, or do you think that's something that should be kind of kept separate?
It's a really interesting question and not one that I necessarily feel particularly qualified to comment on, not having a background in kind of like mental health and therapy. But I think that for certain purposes, there could be tools that are incorporated into it. I don't know. This
Mhm.
actually gives me some great food for thought. Like I would like to, leave this session and do some research to see kind of like how we could incorporate that, if at all. But yeah, it's maybe a little bit too loose of an answer, but hopefully that gets to your question.
No, it totally does. Thank you. Uh, all right. Well, there's one last thing that I want to ask you both before we kind of wrap up and talk a little bit about the Kickstarter. But what I want to know from the both of you, and Kylan, I'll ask you first. What is your biggest hope for a long journey? And I intentionally leave that open ended. But what is your biggest hope for the game?
Whew, boy. Um, Man, that is a really good question. Um, I mean, big like I hadn't really thought of biggest. Like for one, I'm like just shipping the game. It's is um uh the big hope. Man, I wish I had a better, more inspirational thing. I've been so in the business mindset of it of
Hmm.
you know because we have taken creative risks. So with this game and with the inclusivity. So I mean, for me, like being able to ship the game and being able to continue as at a studio seems like if we can do that, that would be like my wildest hope. Which I know sounds so simple, but for indie devs, like it's actually a really difficult thing.
Of course.
So that's I mean, yeah, just shipping it and having, I don't know, like we've already seen in our Discord, we've already seen in the Kickstarter comments, people, well, and even within this podcast from the two of y'all, like people are definitely getting it. They're definitely getting the game, and a lot of our goals that we are hoping to push, um, hoping to convey through the story, I think are happening. So that's already exciting. I think beyond that, yeah, just I mean, just finishing it, just shipping it and finishing it, and letting being able to make the second game or the sequel or whatever our next project is.
No,
That's a
that's
good
awesome.
answer.
Yeah, even the simple answer is something that can be inspiring, right? Rowan, same question. What's your kind of biggest hope for the game?
Now I feel a little bit selfish actually because I was going to say that, we started out talking about kind of like games that have stuck with us and provided us with meaningful moments in our lives. Like I think the biggest accomplishment that I can think of is that this game resonates with somebody in that way, somebody who
Hmm.
may be going through a hard time, who may feel unseen or unheard, and that it gives them, a little well of confidence to draw from within.
That doesn't sound selfish at all. That is wonderfully empathetic. What are
Oh
you
God.
talking about?
Yeah,
Ooh, okay. I'll believe you. I mean, like selfishly, I'd want to be the one who can help with that, I guess. So
yeah.
Much
I
much
think
better
that's
answer. I'm like, I just want to make money, and Rose like, I want to help
no. Oh my
people.
God.
I
No,
was
no, no,
like,
no, no. No, no, no. It's
you need.
tough. God.
I think you need both things to be able to kind of to reach someone, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there is no one without the other.
absolutely.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, Kylan, can you tell us a little bit more about the Kickstarter? How much longer is it running? Where can people find it? And how can people help?
absolutely. So the Kickstarter is live right now. It'll be live until I believe March 4th. And we're over 50% of the way. I think last I checked, it
Woo!
was like 54% of the way towards our goal. Super exciting, super cool. If you want to support us, please check out the Kickstarter, back us if you can. We have some really, really cool rewards. Not only standard things like a really awesome soundtrack made by our composer Jesse Myers, but there's a plushie of Corgi that you can get. They
Yes.
ship miniatures. You can get your name in the game. You can become a character in the game. Bunch of cool stuff. Um, so yeah, check it out. Back us on there. We have a Discord that's really cool. You can join us with. Not only giving feedback about the demo, but we have a sci-fi book club. There's a pet picks channel. All kinds of fun
Adorable.
things there. So yeah, absolutely. Join us there.
I'll make sure to have all of the links in the description below so that everyone can go and find the Kickstarter and everything else because this game is incredible. And if you are curious about the game, go check out the demo. It is free. You can find it on the Kickstarter launch page. Darren and I both played it and we both had a fantastic time with it. So please go support. This is a very, I think, important game. And I think one that a lot of people, excuse me, need to get their eyes on. So go check it out. Excuse me. So that brings us to the end of the show. I want to thank you both again so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure talking to both of you, and I wish you all the best going forward because, like I said, I think this game is very special, and I think it's one that needs to be played. So thank you for making it. I mean, honestly, I don't know how else to say that.
So kind. Thank you for giving us a chance to talk about it. Again, I could talk for weeks about this game. So thank you so much for giving us both a chance to talk more about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to get to talk with both of you today, and you said such kind things. I mean, like, thank you. It's really nice to kind of get that feedback on it, especially where we're in a stage where we're, trying to get it done. So thank you.
Of course. No, thank you for coming.
Yeah, we super appreciated this. We hope as the progress comes along, we hope you guys will come back and join us for another podcast for a celebratory thing somewhat soon.
When
So
it gets shipped, when it's out, we can celebrate. It's going to get
yeah.
wonderful reviews.
My
It's
hero.
gonna be perfect.
One of the rewards is an invite to our digital launch party, so check it out.
There you go. All right, everybody. So you can find us, the Burnout Brighter podcast, over at Spotify, Apple Music, and Apple Podcasts and any major podcast network. You can also find us over on YouTube at Burnout Brighter or on Facebook at the Burnout Brighter podcast. I have been Matt. You can find me at Burnout_Matt on Twitter. Kylan and Rowan, I'm not sure if you guys are on Twitter and stuff. Is there anything else that you guys want to plug personally before we wrap up?
We are on Twitter. As I desperately look up to make sure that I get a Twitter handle right. So if you go to at Crispy Creative, that's all one word, you can follow us and learn more about the game and our updates. And you can learn how you can pet Corgi in the game too.
Oh,
You can pet the dog, yes.
yes.
Very last thing, I swear, but I love when I was going through the Kickstarter, I love that one of the frequently asked questions was, what is Corgi's favorite treat? And how fantastic that answer is. I don't want to spoil the answer, but if you're curious, hop over to Kickstarter because Corgi does have a favorite treat and you need to know what it is.
Yes.
All right, let's bring it on home. So again, everybody, please go check out A Long Journey to an Uncertain End. The Kickstarter will be in the links below. Please go
check it out.
Kylan.
And check it out fast. I just want to say, because I think when this episode airs, there'll be 6 days left on the Kickstarter. So
I'm going to put it up a couple days early. I'm going to put it up a couple days early because this is a time-sensitive thing. So this episode will go live Monday. We generally launch on Wednesdays, but we'll put it up a little bit early to try and get that a little bit more of that push. So please
get in while you can.
Yes, get over onto that Kickstarter. Darren, I want to thank you for joining me once again, and I'm going to ask you to say bye.
Goodbye.
Kylan, again, thank you so much, and I'm going to ask you to say bye.
Goodbye.
And Rowan, again, thank you as well. We hope we'll talk to you soon. All the best with the game going forward, and I'll ask you to say bye.
Thank you so much. See y'all around.
We'll catch you guys next week. Peace out.
Later.
Marie Kondo sounds like the perfect marriage right there. Okay.